Hey, what is up, everybody? I am here to give you a Good Luck Charlie review today. This is Season 1, Episode 3, and this episode is called The Curious Case of Mr. Dabney. And this episode came out on April 18th, 2010. And now let's get right into the episode. So the episode starts off with Teddy, and she's making another one of those video diaries that she makes for her sister. We meet her friend for the first time, Ivy. And Ivy seems pretty cool. They're BFFs, best friends forever. And, they talk about how, girl stuff. And then Amy walks in, Teddy's mom, and, she kind of asks, what they're doing and stuff like that, and she tries not to answer. And they're texting each other as she's there, saying, and Teddy's telling Ivy to ignore her. Maybe she'll go away. And Amy says, "You guys are always texting on those phones. Who are you texting?" She's like, "Nobody." And then Amy's like, "I wish I could do that." And then Ivy's like, "You could probably do that." And Teddy's just like, not ignoring, because she's concerned. And Ivy asks what her phone number is. And Ivy sends her a text and her phone goes off. And Amy's like, "What's that?" And it's like, "I just sent you a text." So then she kind of teaches her how to read the text and everything like that. And Ivy, I guess, sent her something really funny. And Amy thinks it's really funny. So Ivy teaches her what LOL means. And she actually laughs out loud instead of typing it. And then she teaches her how to do the little winky face. And Amy thinks this is the coolest thing ever. So she's never texted before. And so she's like, "I'm gonna see if this works from the kitchen." And then Ivy gets a text that says WHYD, which stands for "What have you done?" And then it cuts to the theme song. And then it cuts to the next scene with PJ and Charlie. And PJ is playing on his guitar. And Charlie's now learned how to clap. So PJ says, "This has become a lot more fun since you learned how to clap. Because every time he doesn't play, she claps." And Gabe comes up and... and we also hear the Dabneys, Mr. and Mrs. Dabney, arguing. And... which was really funny. We hear a big bump happen. And Gabe comes up and tells PJ that he kicked the football into the Dabney's backyard. And he wants PJ to go get it. And PJ says, "Nah, they're going at it again." And Gabe's like, "Well, what about the football?" And PJ's like, "Well, that thing's history. Forget about it." And Gabe's like, "Well, I'm glad you feel that way, because that was your football." So then the next scene, PJ goes to get the football, and he overhears Mrs. Dabney saying, "Ha, that's what you get for being a bad husband, and now you're dead." So obviously Mrs. Dabney killed her husband. So PJ gets freaked out by this, and he hears the watering keg, the thing you would use to water the plants. I think it's called a watering keg. He kicks that and he kind of falls off the deck. And Mrs. Dabney comes out and she's like, "Who's out here?" And she has I don't know what it's called, but it's the thing that you use to make steak if you're grilling on the grill. And we're supposed to think that she probably used that to kill Mr. Dabney. And there's going to be a little bit of a spoiler, but well, hold on, I'll say it at the end. And then she leaves, and then PJ comes out. He hid behind some leaves, and he jumps over the fence. And then Mrs. Dabney comes out again, and she pops PJ's football. And then PJ comes home and tells Gabe that Mrs. Dabney murdered Mr. Dabney. And Gabe doesn't think it's true. He even says, Mrs. Dabney may be a mean old witch, but she would never do anything like that. And PJ says, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna prove it." So then he calls Mrs. Dabney, and he disguises his voice and asks for Mr. Dabney. And she says, "No, Mr. Dabney can't come to the phone right now. He's gone." And he says that he's some sort of salesman. And he's like, "Interesting. Where is Mr. Dabney?" And Mrs. Dabney thinks it's Gabe. And PJ's like, "Why would you assume my name is Gabe?" And then she says, "Because I have caller ID." And then PJ says, "Oh, then this is Mrs. Then this is Gabe." And then he hangs up, and PJ's like, "Hey." Um, then Gabe still doesn't believe him, and PJ's like, "Why don't you believe me?" He's like, Gabe's like, "Well, you're not very good at this kind of stuff," or something like that. And then PJ says, "What are you saying? What are you saying? I'm dumb?" And Gabe's like, "No, you're not very thinky." And PJ's like, "Why would you say that?" And Gabe says, "Because Mom said I can't call you dumb," which I thought was pretty funny. And then the next scene, Teddy and Ivy are in a room, and Teddy tells Ivy that her mom is texting in the kitchen, and she would hate to be the other end of that conversation. And Ivy's actually on the end of that conversation, so Teddy just thinks that Amy's just constantly texting her, so she says, "If it's bugging you, I'll try to get her off your back." But then Ivy says, "No, your mom is cool. She's funny." And then Teddy's like, "My mom's what?" She's like shocked about this. And Teddy's asked, "What are you talking to her about?" And she says, "Nothing." Like, even though we really know she's talking about something. But, she just says nothing. But then Teddy responds in the funniest way ever by saying, "That's what we say to her." Well, not the funniest way ever, but in a pretty funny way. And then Ivy says, "Do you have a problem with this?" And Teddy says that I just think it's a little inappropriate to be texting my mom. And Ivy says, "Now you sound like my mom." And Teddy says, "How would you know? You spend so much time talking to mine." And then Ivy said, Teddy asks, "How would you feel if I was texting? Wouldn't you feel a little weirded out if you were texting my mom?" And then Ivy says, "Yes, because she doesn't have a cell phone." And then Ivy says that if it's bugging her, then she'll stop. And then Teddy says, "No, go crazy. Text my mom. I am my dad. Video chat my Aunt Helen." And then Ivy says, "Oh, your Aunt Helen?" Well, no, Ellen, not Helen. Your Aunt Ellen? Your mom says that she is the bomb diggity, which I guess means that she's pretty much the shit. And then Teddy's like, "My mom really said that?" And then Ivy's like, "I may have added that part," which I thought was funny. I never had heard the bomb diggity until she said that, but I pretty much mean that she's pretty much the shit. So then the next scene is PJ is watching some sort of mystery movies. So it will help him because he's gonna use these mystery movies to help him catch Mrs. Dabney on the act. I guess I don't know. Well, to catch Mrs. Dabney just so that way she can be like caught to pretty much prove that Mrs. Dabney killed Mr. Dabney. Yeah? Catching her in the act means catching her having sex. Oh, my bad. Alright, yeah, that's kind of funny how you said that. Wait, do you want to come and talk about this too or not? I'm kind of sleeping. Oh, sorry. Nah, it's fine. Can you keep your voice down a little though? Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, so, yeah, by the way, my I don't know if you heard that, but my cousin just said catching her in the act means having sex. So I gotta I meant to say like catching her killing, but I didn't mean to say that. Yeah, I was being a little loud. I don't know if you heard that though, but he wants to pretty much prove that Mrs. Dabney killed Mr. Dabney, and he says that these mystery movies are gonna help him do that. And then Gabe says that's pretty much like saying that cartoons will help you run through walls. And then PJ says learn that the hard way, which I thought was hilarious. And then the door went. Well, somebody knocks on the door, and Gabe says, "Mom, could you get that?" And Amy says sarcastically, "Sure, I am a lot closer to it," because he was like right there when he said that. And she answers the door, and Mrs. Dabney wants to speak to Bob Duncan, and she's like, "Sure, I'll let him know you're here." And then she texts him, slow as hell. She's really slow texter, but she just started texting, so it makes sense. But then she's like bragging about it. I'm a texter now. And then she says it really speeds things up, which it would have been faster just to scream his name. And then when Bob comes out, Bob's like, "Honey, what does this mean? Somebody's at the doof." She pretty much messed up and said doof instead of door. Then Mrs. Dabney comes in and asks how to get rid of the smell of death in her, I think she said a drive-in or house. And Bob's, and then like this mystery music plays, and it's from the movie. And Bob's like, "Will you turn that down, please?" And Bob says, "Well, first the first thing you're gonna have to do is locate the corpse and carcass." And he's like, "I suppose you can get Mr. Dabney to do that." And Mrs. Dabney says, "Oh no, Mr. Dabney won't be doing anything for a while. He's gone." And she says it like really mysteriously, like she did murder Mr. Dabney. And PJ and Gabe are obviously listening to this because they're right there. And then when that happens, the mystery music plays again, and Bob's like, "Would you just turn that off?" So they do. And then he says that you can get some syrup and let it simmer on the stove or something, and then the smell will go away. And then Mrs. Dabney says, like really mysteriously again, "That's very useful information." And then she says, "Bye, boys." Like just like that. And then Bob gets a text from Amy saying that, well, abbreviated, that she was in the bathroom out of toilet paper. And he says TMI. And if you don't know what that means, you're pretty much an idiot. Pretty much, but I'll tell you, it means too much information. So then Gabe says, "PJ, I never thought I'd say this, but you're right. Mrs. Dabney did murder Mr. Dabney." And PJ says, "So this is what it feels like to be right. It feels awesome. Too bad somebody had to die, but, which it is unfortunate, but..." And then PJ says that we have to suggest that they tell their parents about it, but Gabe says they're not going to believe you because I didn't believe you and I'm 10. So PJ says, "Well, we're going to have to get proof, and to get proof, we're going to have to go into the murder house, which is Mrs. Dabney's house." And then Gabe, the mystery music plays again, and Gabe's like, "I thought we turned that off." So then it keeps playing, and then they run away, which that was really funny. I like how, like, normally you would hear this music play anyways, but I like how when it happens there, they actually talk about it and they reference it and they utilize it in a joke. So that was pretty cool. So then next, the next scene was Teddy and Ivy are doing homework, and Teddy asked her for one of the answers, and Ivy said she got Switzerland, and Teddy's like, "Well, that's weird since we're doing math." And then the door, which was a funny scene, and then the door lands, and it ends up being Ivy's mom. And Teddy says that her and Ivy's mom are gonna chill, and Ivy goes in the kitchen, I guess, to text Amy. And Teddy sits down, and she says they're gonna chill. Mrs. Wentz was what Ivy's last name is. Doesn't understand what chill means, so she said something about chilling. So then Teddy, they kind of start talking, um, and Teddy asked her where she got her outfit. She said in my closet, and she asked what Ivy did wrong. If she's back on the chocolate, which I guess she can't have chocolate. Um, and then Teddy says, and then they started to listen to music, but Mrs. Wentz says has her turn it down all the way, and then Mrs. Wentz pretty much is boring. Um, she's very, her voice is really boring. She talks very monotone, stuff like that. They try to do a video diary, but just being way too boring. And then Teddy asks what functions things she likes to does, and she likes to read knitted magazines and knit. And Teddy says, "That's really cool. I'll definitely try to do that." Like very sarcastically, pretty much. And then Mrs. Wentz pulls him out of a post. So then the next scene is PJ and Gabe and Charlie go to Mrs. Dabney's house, and originally PJ was just gonna jump the fence and have Gabe hand over Charlie, and then he was gonna, I don't know how he'd get Gabe up there, but then Gabe just opened the door, which was really funny. And then they look through the window to try to find any evidence that Mrs. Dabney killed Mr. Dabney. And what else? And Gabe even says, "Oh, that's terrible. That wall paint, it doesn't fit the room," which I thought was awesome. My paint color, that's what he says. And then as this is happening, as they're trying to look, Charlie crawls through the cat door, and then they see Charlie in there. So then they realize they have to get her out of there. And then the next scene is Mrs. Wentz is knitting, and Teddy gets really bored, so then she goes in the kitchen, and Teddy just tells Ivy that she's given up, and then Mrs. Ivy says that the reason why I'm always here is because my mom is so boring, which is true. Ivy's mom is really boring. So then Teddy says, "Yeah, I know. So from now on, you can text my mom, even though I think it's a little weird, but I don't. Even though I think it's a little weird, but Ivy comes up with a better plan, and what she does is she puts them both together. She has Amy and Ivy's mom hang out, and Teddy says, "Well, this is brilliant," and Ivy says, "See, this is why we're BFFs. You're brilliant, I'm brilliant, and you recognize it." So then Ivy and Ivy's mom and Teddy's mom, Amy, are just talking. And they're talking about texting, and Ivy's mom says, "I've got to get a cell phone." And then the next scene, PJ tries to lure Charlie back by using his house key, and because Charlie likes things without ladder apparently, so he tries to lure her back. He puts his hand through the cat door, but he ends up dropping him. And Gabe says, "Now he can't get into our house either." And then Mrs. Dabney comes home, and she asks why she's there, and Gabe says, "I wanted to help you put in the groceries," which was very suspicious. And Mrs. Dabney says, "You want to be helpful," and Gabe says, "I like to try new things." And the reason if I was Mrs. Dabney, I would say, "How would you even know I went to the grocery store?" But she says that she can handle the groceries, but she said, "I do need your help with something inside." And she says it really mysteriously, too. Then they go inside, and they find Charlie. And earlier she had put Mrs. Dabney's underpants on her head, and they took them off, and they start tossing with them, and then Gabe tosses it into the fireplace. And then Mrs. Dabney comes out, and she gets suspicious when she sees PJ holding Charlie, and PJ says, "I've been holding her the whole time." She says, "You have?" And Gabe says, "They say the first thing to go is eyesight." So I thought that was funny. And then Mrs. Dabney wants PJ and Gabe to take out this chest because it's out to a car because it's too heavy for her to take. And PJ gets suspicious about what's in the chest, and he says, "Where are you going to take it?" And Mrs. Dabney says, "To the dump. That's where you take trash, ain't it?" And PJ says, Mr. Dabney was not trash. He was a good man or something like that. And Mrs. Dabney said, what are you talking about? And PJ pretty much said that you killed your husband and put him in that chest. And she says, is that what you two think? You want to see what's inside? Take a look. And she like breaks the lock. And PJ opens it and she sees like a skeleton in there. And so he thinks that's Mr. Dabney's rotting corpse, but he's already been decomposed. And Mrs. Dabney says, no, that's just like a replica skeleton. He used to, because Mr. Dabney used to be a science teacher. Um, and PJ asks, well, so she pretty much says that she doesn't murder Mr. Dabney, and the reasons, the explanations that she gives for the reasons that she didn't do when PJ heard her earlier saying that's what you get for being a bad husband, that you're dead, so that she was just talking back to one of her soap operas, and she says that they should make one after you two, The Young and the Clueless, which was really funny. And then she says that the smell of death is dead possum in my drive-in, and the reason Mr. Dabney isn't there is because he's at his mother's house, probably wishing he was dead. Then Gabe asks if she has any cookies, and Mrs. Dabney just kicks them both out. And then she finds her underwear on the fireplace. She's like, why is my underwear on the fireplace? And PJ and Gabe just walk off like they don't know anything about it. And then next scene is Teddy is filming her video diaries. And Amy walks in, and Teddy says, I've been thinking maybe you and I should start texting. And Amy's like, yeah, sorry, those days are over. Text thumbs, and they're all like wrapped up in bandages. And Teddy's just like, text thumbs. See, that's our mom. From cool to stupid, just like that. No, from cool to embarrassing, just like that. Then she says, good luck, Charlie, to like end it off, because that's normally how they end off. And then they do a bonus scene, as they normally do at the end. And PJ and Gabe walk in with the skeleton, and they ask Bob and Amy are in the living room, and Bob makes like a lame joke, which was kind of funny, saying, you may want to get your friend some sandwich, he's looking a little skinny. Like, you may want to get your friend a snack, he's looking a little skinny, or something like that. And they tell him that this was Mr. Dabney's, he used to be a science teacher, and Bob says, Mr. Dabney wasn't a science teacher, he was a music teacher. So then PJ and Gabe are like, then this is Mr. Dabney. So then they get all freaked out and run away. And Amy says, Mr. Dabney wasn't a science teacher. You're thinking of Mr. Dixon, I think she said, across the street. I don't remember the guy's name. Or Nixon, I don't remember. And Bob's like, oh yeah, Mr. Dabney was a science teacher. And then she says, do the boys seem a little freaked out to you? And Bob says, I just got here. And Mrs. Dabney asked that earlier. She said, what's wrong with your boys today? And Bob says, I just got here. And then that was the end of the episode pretty much. But overall, this episode was actually pretty good. It's probably one of those skippable episodes because the story doesn't really go anywhere. You know, it's pretty obvious that Mrs. Dabney doesn't kill Mr. Dabney, but it's still pretty funny to watch. I think it's a really funny episode. But overall, that's pretty much it, guys. You can click down here to subscribe. And if you want to see more Good Luck Charlie reviews and the annotations, I'll post up the playlist for that. And that's pretty much it, guys. See you later.